God, in whom we live and move and have our being. Amen. So, what are you waiting for? It seems like the simplest of questions, but the way you answer it decides many things, not the least of which is how you wait for whatever it is that you're waiting for. Advent has begun again. And even though the annual calendar doesn't change for a few weeks, today is the first Sunday of a new church year. And that fact is just one indication of the culture clash that some of us begin to notice a little more acutely at this particular time of year, especially those of us who consider ourselves to be Christians. One of the things I tend to like the least about TV is the rush of holiday shopping commercials that flood the airwaves at this particular time of year. A few years ago, my favorite Christmas commercial to dislike featured a very intense, skinny blonde lady who had her hair severely pulled back in a ponytail, and she wore bright red lipstick and bright red weird outfits. And she had this permanently crazed look on her face. It was kind of like she got into someone's meth lab and never got out. So I don't know if you know the woman I'm talking about, but we saw her on many commercials in the Boston area, and here she is. Does this person look familiar? Anybody down here in the beautiful state of New Jersey? There she was. She was actually the mascot for Target, if I'm not mistaken. She made a very convincing, stressed out beyond belief, intense, psychotic holiday shopper. Now, I know she was supposed to be funny, and she actually was kind of funny, in a way. But every time I saw her, she made me a little sad. Because even though I understood that she was supposed to be a caricature, she was really way too much like us. She really was. Even though she was probably not intended to be, she was just too darn real, to tell you the truth. She is us. And that always made me kind of sad. However, just as our overstressed, over-commercialized, and over-consuming culture is getting geared up to try to hijack one of Christianity's most beautiful holy days, the church is calling us to Advent. To Advent. Advent is a time of stillness, of silence, of taking time and making time. It's a time of space and even of emptiness. It's a time to clear aside some of the too much that clutters up our hearts and our lives. It's a time to make room for the coming of Christ. More than anything else, Advent is a time to wait, to wait. So it's good to wonder, right now at the beginning of Advent, it's good to wonder about exactly what it is that we're waiting for. And the answer to that question will teach us how we should wait. The gospel today is an interesting one in that regard. Jesus is talking privately with his disciples. Matthew tells us that this conversation occurred right near the end of their time together, right before Jesus began the last days leading up to his passion and death and resurrection. So in this section of Matthew's gospel, Jesus has been talking with the disciples about the end times, the end of the temple, the end of Jerusalem, the end of the world. And of course, they want to know when. Most of us want to know when too. But Jesus gives them a most unsatisfying answer. He says that only God knows when. Well, that's entirely unhelpful, isn't it? Well, perhaps not, because it seems that Jesus is telling them that they're actually asking the wrong question. And it might be because they don't really understand what it is that they're waiting for. When the disciples hear Jesus talking about the end times, they assume the worst. The temple will be thrown down. Not one stone will be left upon another, Jesus said. Jerusalem will be destroyed. See, your house is left to you desolate, he also said. Even the entire creation will participate in the undoing of the elements. Scripture says there will be famines and earthquakes. The sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven and all the powers of heaven will be shaken. And then what? Scripture goes on to say, and then you will see the Son of Man coming with power and great glory. He will send out his angels to gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. And so, is that supposed to be a bad thing? The end of the world is the beginning of the fulfillment of God's kingdom. The end of time is the beginning of eternity. The end of life as we know it is the beginning of life as God knows it. For Christians, the end is the beginning. Always. Always. But see what I mean? The disciples automatically assumed that the end of life as they knew it would be a disaster. But that isn't at all what God has in mind. And maybe they didn't understand that because they didn't really understand God. What you are waiting for will decide how you wait. Disciples thought that they would be waiting in fear because they didn't understand that they were waiting for God, for Christ, for the one who loves them beyond their wildest hopes or dreams or imaginings. They were, in fact, waiting for the lover of their souls. And so what about us? When you heard the words from today's gospel reading, how did they strike you? Here are some of them again. But about that day and hour no one knows, neither the angels of heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. Keep awake, therefore, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. Therefore you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an unexpected hour. So when you hear those things, are you fearful or excited? Despairing or anticipating? When you hear those things, are you afraid or are you filled with joyful expectation? It depends on what you're waiting for, doesn't it? This is just one more reason why God should never be a stranger to us. As Christians, we should know, really know, the one who we are waiting for. We should know God deeply, intimately, fully. If you think of God as the divine state trooper, just waiting for you to mess up so he can pull you over, or worse. If you think of God as a terrifying, hateful, bloodthirsty, vindictive deity waiting to destroy everything in creation, including you, even if you think of God as a broken human parent, twisted by his own fear and pain into wanting to inflict fear and pain on others, if you think of God in any of those ways, here's the good news, literally. If you think of God in any of those ways, you've got the wrong God. You've got the wrong God. None of that has anything to do with the God and Father of Jesus Christ. So, back to Advent. What are we waiting for? Are we like that poor, crazy, stressed out lady in the commercials? Are we waiting to spend all our money on things that nobody really wants or needs for anything? Are we waiting to go even further into debt? Are we waiting to rev up our already out of control stress levels into the stratosphere? Are we waiting for a holy day that's been transformed into the most superficial of commercial catastrophes? I don't think so. We are waiting to celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ. The end of life as we know it is the beginning of life as God knows it. And that can start right now. Right now. Advent is a time of stillness, of silence, of taking time and making time. It's a time of space and even of emptiness. It's a time to clear aside some of the usual too much that clutters up our hearts and our lives. It's a time to make room for the coming of Christ. More than anything else, Advent is a time to wait. And it's a time to get to know the one for whom we wait. I don't know about you, but I'm waiting for the lover of my soul. I hope and pray that you are too. So welcome to Advent. What are you waiting for?